Good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. Melissa Clarke, and welcome back to another episode of Excuse Me, Doctor, our streaming show on Facebook and YouTube that is here primarily to inform you and to empower you with health related information that you community can use to get to better health. And, there's so much misinformation out there about health, specifically about COVID-19. There's theories, rumors, speculation, misinformation, all kinds of stuff on social media. And we're here primarily to try to help set the record straight with science and with facts and what we know. And so I'm here to share that with you this week. It's great to be back. We've been on a hiatus, and I'll talk with you more about that at the end of the show. But today is the solstice, and we are into the Christmas season now, and I want to wish everybody happy holidays. You could be doing a million things right now, wrapping presents, grocery shopping, just chilling. But you're here with us, and we really appreciate that. I know that you have 1,000 questions on your mind about COVID, about these holidays, and especially about the vaccine. So we're going to get to that tonight. And I have my team with me. I am so happy that they are here. The incomparable Lila Mays, one of my producers out on the West Coast. And of course, my marvelous and fantastic husband, producer extraordinaire, Wayne Bruce.
Get it right. Get it right.
Yeah, I got to. And they are going to work with me tonight to take all of your questions. Y'all have been sending in questions all during the day today. We got those. We got you. And anybody else who wants to jump in and type on Facebook, please do so. While you're there, all my new viewers, please hit like on Facebook. And if you're checking me out on YouTube, please make sure to hit subscribe. So with all that out of the way, and I see folks coming on. Hi, everybody. Let's get to it because we have a lot to cover and not a whole lot of time. So Wayne and Lila, what's on your mind?
Well, it's not what is on our mind. I think it's what's on everybody in the country's mind. And you'll see me, those who don't know, I'm generally, I got a million things going here as a producer going on. But I think what's going on in everybody's mind right this second is vaccine. But before we get to the vaccine,
sure.
You think so, Lila? And Lila is in Los Angeles. So she has a totally different perspective.
Ground zero right now.
She's in ground zero. And so would you...
You see, she's in that room with all the doors closed and all the windows barred because she's trying to stay safe.
She is. So before we go vaccine, I think we have to talk about how we got here. Why are we even on air? Why are we even streaming? I mean, just January. Let's start at the beginning of the year. We can start at the end of last year, December. We had a wonderful Christmas, everyone. A wonderful Kwanzaa, a happy Hanukkah, everybody. We had so much fun last year, and this year, not so much. So we got to talk about how we got here. Don't you think, Lila? Yeah, don't you think we have to talk about that, Lila? She's on a delay.
I do. So, yeah, you want to? I'm sorry. I am. So here's what the West Coast producer is going to do.
Okay. So, like everybody in LA is using the internet right now. So she's going to sign off and she's going to come back. But I want to talk about how we got here. How we got to this place. Now we know about your book, and you wrote the book, Excuse Me, Doctor, about 6 or 7 years ago. But how we got here on the streaming show is January, we were on a cruise, you and I,
Yeah.
along with 4,000 other people
Yeah.
enjoying it. I got to shout out Capital Jazz Cruise, which I music direct, but at least I did. Didn't sell this year, but uh, and then we leave the cruise, and I fly to Los Angeles to the Grammys, and you meet me there, and everything is hunky dory in our world.
This
Meanwhile,
is February,
this is February. Meanwhile, the world is starting to burn,
and we
and
don't
it
even realize it.
and we don't even realize it. And
So
then
yeah.
we get here, and it is March, and I think Lila's coming back in. We're going to add Lila in. Lila, you back?
So yeah. Hi, Lila.
Hey, I'm
Let's
back.
talk about how we got here. So I'm going to divide the year up into quarters.
Okay, go ahead.
January to March. As Wayne mentioned, we were all living our best lives. We were partying, traveling, skiing, getting together with family, not even thinking about it. But January 9th was when WHO, World Health Organization, announced this new disease that was in China, and they had 59 cases and some deaths. Nobody really paid a whole lot of attention. And then by the time February came around, actually, even before that, January 21st was when the first case was announced in the United States. It had been somebody who was a U.S. citizen but had been to Wuhan, China, and was back. And they tested him and found that he was indeed positive for coronavirus. We heard about it. We didn't really think about it. We continued to live our best life. February came around, and global air travel started to be restricted. U.S. declared a public health emergency. And that last week of February, I mentioned people are skiing. The National Brotherhood of Skiers met for their national convention last week of February, first week of March. Had a ball, went back home. Everybody was saying, well, black people don't get COVID. They were living, again, their best life thinking that, well, because there weren't a lot of cases in Africa, that meant black people were immune. Well, March was everybody's wake up call. And the WHO declared that COVID 19 had met the criteria for a pandemic, meaning worldwide spread, human to human transmission. And the travel bans in the United States went into effect. California issued a statewide stay at home order. And those black skiers that I mentioned, not only, unfortunately, were they testing positive for COVID and some ending up hospitalized, but Idris Elba tested positive for COVID. And I think that's when black people really sat up, and paid attention and were like, wow, black people can get COVID 19. And by the time we got to April to June, not only was it clear that we could get COVID 19, it was clear that we were getting COVID 19 more than everybody else and dying more than everybody else. And that's when, at the beginning of April, was when my show started. A lot of other people started to get together and say, hey, we need to start taking this seriously. And then from April to June, that was when the northeastern states, New York, New Jersey, etc., became ground zero. We were hearing a lot about deaths, about the container trucks that were brought in to hold bodies because the morgue was running out of space. We heard about testing deserts, especially in black communities, lack of PPE in hospitals. Masks weren't even being talked about, really. Some people were asking about them, and the CDC was saying, no, you don't need them. And so black and brown people who were frontline workers, 80% of whom could not work from home due to their jobs, were going out like lambs to the slaughter without masks, interacting with the public, and getting COVID and bringing it back home like Trojan horses to their families, because many of the frontline workers weren't showing symptoms, but they brought it back home to their family members. And so that was the summer, and that was when the the politics started around the vaccine. When Trump started to say, yeah, we're going to open up back up for Easter, and we got to get the economy going, and it doesn't matter what the virus is doing. We got to get the economy going, and you know, we started understanding that numbers were being fudged in some states like Florida, and that come June, July, the CDC was not front and center where they should be in this pandemic, but information was getting shuttled over to HHS, which was under the direct control of the Trump administration. And concerns started to happen around is there transparency, is there truthfulness when it comes to the information being given out. Large gatherings were being held by the administration to in the run up to the election. No masks. Trump goes to tour a facility without any masks, even though everybody around him has it. Thank you, Wayne, for the props. And so now we're rolling into the summer. We're learning more about the vaccine. There seems to be a little lull. Those huge spikes that we saw in the spring and early summer in New York were going away, but we were just about to get into where the South was about to get hit. Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Florida all took off at the beginning of the summer when everywhere else was coming down, and their trajectory got worse and worse and worse. But as we started to learn in the medical profession about how to take care of the virus and people with the virus better, the death rate started to go down, even though the case count was going up. We learned about steroids being helpful. We learned about vitamin D and not putting everybody on ventilators, actually flipping them over on their stomach because they did better. Testing was better, so people were identifying that they had the virus earlier and they were coming into the hospital. And so the death rate seemed to go down, but then Sturgis happened in the middle of the summer. That huge motorcycle rally, 500,000 people in the middle of nowhere, North Dakota, South Dakota. And unfortunately, it kicked off a whole nother spike, coupled with Labor Day, that took us into September and October with a fury in terms of cases increasing throughout the Midwest. And so in the last 3 months between October and now, we've heard about the vaccines being developed and the success of the trials. We heard about some trials being paused. AstraZeneca was one of the prominent ones that got paused. J&J got paused because of concerns that needed to be investigated, but they got restarted mainly because it was not a life-threatening complication that happened. It was one complication that was investigated in each trial, and the people recovered, and the trial went back underway. And now here we are in the last month. We're at 18 million cases, which just at the end of October had been 7 million. And it skyrocketed since then. And we have a vaccine. Actually, we have two vaccines because Moderna's just got approved over the weekend. And so everybody's question is, should I take this vaccine?
Yes, that's
I'm taking
everybody's
it.
question.
So
I
that's how
mean,
we got here.
that's how we got here, and so that was the short. That was the short version. We had to actually live through all of that,
Yeah.
and everybody. I mean, that's the question this week. Everybody I call who know we have this show want to hear from you, and you've been out. I just want to tell everybody that you've been through your own medical. I don't know if you want to call it a crisis, but medical ordeal. It's a crisis for some of us. You came through flying colors, and everybody this week has been asking the same question, like, uh, what does she think of of the vaccine? I mean, and I mean that's the quick question. But as soon as we announced this, as soon as we announced we were coming back tonight, your page flooded
Yes.
with 50 50 questions. And so, Lila, I mean, from a West Coast perspective, what what do you think? What have people? As soon as we said we were going live and you were coming on, did people call you with questions,
Well, people call me with statements more than
with
questions.
statements? Here we go.
So what's really interesting about this is LA is an absolute hotspot. And if you were here and you saw all of this activity in the city, you would understand why LA is a hotspot. That's a whole nother conversation. Well, not really. It's part of the conversation. So the statements are, I'm not taking it. You take it first and let me know how that goes. Okay, I will. However, um, the behavior that is happening in these cities that are hotspots, there's no question why they're hotspots. So it's really, really interesting to me that people are so afraid of what this vaccine might be. So I've said a couple of things in some of my social spaces, platforms. It's amazing to me that we won't do what it takes to get this thing under control. And now that we have a preventative measure, we're even more skeptical of that, but not skeptical of gathering and not wearing masks. So that's my bandwagon. But those are the kinds of statements the questions really, Melissa's page has been flooded with all kinds of questions. But interesting the sentiments from the West Coast.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Wow. That's amazing from the standpoint that, you know, you said an incredible thing. We won't do what it takes to stop it.
Yeah,
Right.
But we disbelieve in things that will help us stem the tide of it.
right.
And
One of
so I just want to go quickly because you have so many questions on your page. I mean, and you have this is amazing. She has questions on her page from everything about needle technology
Right.
to are you going to take it when it comes up?
Yeah.
So everybody wants to know, are you going to take it? And that was posed to me and posed uh and I can only say one thing. We know what COVID does to people.
Right.
There is an alternative. You not take it, and now one in every 10 people you see, if you're in a gathering of 10, somebody in that group has COVID. That's just where we are right now.
Right.
exactly.
If
So
you're in it's 9/11. I tell people this every year we are solemn and we remember 9/11. Uh Tragedy that happened in New York. Twin Towers came down. I lost friends. I have my friends who lost family members. We honor that every year since then. It's 19 years this past year. We have a 9/11 happening every day in
Every
the country.
day. Every day.
and not only that, as one of my esteemed colleagues pointed out, we have a 9/11 happening every day, but we keep running back into the burning
Into
building
the
as it's
burning building.
collapsing,
Mm.
acting like nothing's going to happen to me.
Wow.
That's the tragedy that
Mhm.
we a lot of people are seeing the building burning and saying don't go in there, and people are steady running in. That's the
Mm.
concern. And that's one of the reasons I got on this platform, to answer people's questions, but also to continue to sound the alarm to everybody, but especially black people who, when you go in that building, your chance of it collapsing on you is 3 times more than
Mhm.
white people.
Right.
Yeah.
So, you know, those
So
are some of the considerations as we ask the question: should I take the virus? I mean, should I take the vaccine?
I just want to let everybody know that type if you're watching on any of the platforms now, type in your questions and we will answer your questions. Not us, not the producers. The producers, we're gonna give our opinion on it. The doctor will answer your question. So I want to go to to uh to a question that was on your page, and it comes from Jan Desper Peters, and she writes, What are the differences between the Moderna vaccine and the Pfizer vaccine, and the AstraZeneca is next?
Okay. So before I go into those particulars, I think we need to level set and make sure everybody knows what a vaccine is and does.
Okay.
Because before I can
Yeah.
go into what the differences are, you got to understand the basics, the foundation. So the principle of vaccines is just to introduce a foreign substance into your body that will cause your body to mount a customized response to that particular agent. So that when it encounters that agent in the future, it's ready. The
Mhm.
troops have already been trained, they know exactly what that agent looks like. And so, in a very short period of time, we're talking minutes to hours, it can mount a response and beat that thing down, beat it back, and keep you from getting symptoms. Now, what that agent that gets introduced into the body looks like is the secret sauce. Now, one thing everybody should know is that an African American in the 1700s was the first one to introduce the concept of vaccines to the United States.
Come on now.
He was an African brought to the Americas for the purpose of enslavement. He was owned by, I hate that word, Cotton Mather in Boston when the smallpox epidemic broke out. He explained to Cotton Mather that he was not going to get sick because he had received, somebody had taken, when he was in Africa, taken some pus from somebody who was sick and rubbed it into an open sore on his body, an open wound on his body. And he was immune. He didn't use those words, I'm sure, but he could not get smallpox. So he explained that to them. Cotton Mather was like, oh, wow, that's cool. I've never heard that before. And so he got with a doctor friend and they proselytized about this and eventually were able to do the same thing to people in Boston, realized that it protected them from getting smallpox. And that was how vaccines were born in the United States. And since then, we've had a lot of improvements specifically to address two issues. One, to make sure that they're safe, that they don't cause disease when that foreign agent is introduced. And the second is to make sure that it works, that it causes the immune system to get revved up and do what it does. And so, to that extent, one major advancement was to start adding things to the virus or bacteria to enhance the immune response, especially for older people, because older people's immune systems don't ramp up that much. So they use things like aluminum, like stuff from shark bones, just all kinds of stuff that they had around, and started adding it. And those things have been in vaccines ever since and got much more popular in the 1920s all the way till today. And when you add those things in, it makes it boosts how irritating the vaccine is to our immune system, which means that the response will be huge and long lasting. And without it, you might not have that. The other advancement was, instead of using the actual virus or the actual bacteria, they use just a little piece of it so that it cannot cause disease. So those are the two major things. So now, what is the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccine? They are a messenger RNA of the virus. What's messenger RNA? It's a code. All of our entire body is made up of proteins, right? And those proteins come from a code, our DNA. And in order for the DNA to get translated into a protein, there's an intermediate step called RNA. So it's the code. It reads the DNA. It becomes the template, and then proteins come along and use that RNA to make the proteins that are in our body. Viruses work the same way. Viruses have proteins and they have DNA and they have messenger RNA. And so what scientists have done have taken the messenger RNA just for a specific part of the virus, and that's the spike protein, the thing that makes it stick onto your cell, and then the cell takes it in and it reproduces itself and busts the cell open, and all the viruses go everywhere, all in your body, to infect other cells. So that little spike protein, the RNA is just for that little piece. They introduce that into the body via the vaccine. Your body takes it up, and its body's own machinery uses that RNA to start making the viral protein. Your body recognizes the viral protein, forms antibodies against it, and cells that recognize it. It might cause, because it's a foreign agent, it will cause some symptoms in your body, like a little mini sickness. So, fever, body aches, chills, headache,
Okay.
and that shows you that the vaccine is working.
So 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 if you get fever, body aches, and chills after you get the vaccine, it means it's working, not that you have an allergic response.
Correct. That is right. And
Mu- mu-
those tend to last for a couple days,
Much like the flu,
like the flu
Well,
the flu
vaccine for
shot.
some
Yeah.
people. It doesn't mean that the flu vaccine gave you the flu. It
Right.
means that your immune system is rehearsing, it's the dress
Right.
rehearsal for when the real thing actually invades your body.
so say
Right.
that again, because I don't know how many times I've met people, including myself. I used to say it before I married you. I got a vaccine, and the vaccine gave me the
And
flu,
I got sick. Right.
and I got sick. I'm never. But how about this? I tell people all the time. I mentioned the story uh, a few weeks ago, a few months ago, when we first did the show, Lila. I mentioned this story about being in the CVS and seeing a musician friend of mine, and she saying, "Be careful, they're going to put diamond dust
Right. Right. Right.
in the vaccine." And I promptly asked her which vaccine, because I was about to take the flu vaccine. And my dad just took a pneumonia and a shingles.
Right.
And because if you're talking about the COVID vaccine, why wouldn't they put the diamond dust and the 5G stuff in the things that we think are already safe?
Right.
So, there is nanotechnology and nano platforms and dust in the vaccine. It's there.
Okay.
But it's supposed to be there, and that's the only way that it works. It's not introducing some kind of technology into your body. Nano just means little.
Okay.
And so there are little particles and little platforms and little dust in the vaccine because it's little.
so 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 you mean to tell me I'm not going to start receiving my calls on my arm?
No, not from the vaccine, maybe your Apple Watch.
Okay, let's go to some questions. Is that okay? Is that okay, Lila?
Yeah. Let's go.
While
Let's
you're
go with.
looking at the next question, the main differences between Pfizer and Moderna vaccine are one, the Pfizer vaccine has to have super cold, minus 70 degrees, special
Right.
freezers, so it can only be administered in hospitals and special facilities, whereas the Moderna vaccine can be put in a regular freezer, and so it's going to be able to be distributed much more widely across the United States. The Pfizer trial had about 38,000 people. The Moderna trial had about 30,000 people. Both of them had about 10% black people in each. And then their side effects are the same. We talked about the side effects. They happen at about the same frequency, and they both need two administrations. The Pfizer vaccine is 3 weeks from the first dose. The Moderna is a month from the first dose. The Moderna is 3 weeks from the first dose. For both of them, it seems that the second dose, you get a little bit more of those side effects than with the first dose. And if the older you are, the less likely you are to get side effects because older people's immune systems aren't as strong as younger people, so it doesn't rev up as powerfully.
Mm.
Okay. So we're going to go to our first question, and I'm going to go to this question because she wrote the question on your page. before the show, and she came out tonight. We want to thank Trina Williams. Will the vaccine benefit those in ICUs or already on ventilators?
Excellent question, Trina. No, it would not be appropriate to give somebody who actually already has
Yeah.
COVID 19 the vaccine. Again, the purpose of the vaccine is to boost your immune system. So your immune system is already engaged with fighting the vaccine if you're in the ICU. So that wouldn't be helpful. Down the line, people who've recovered from COVID, some of them were included in these trials, people who had COVID back in the spring and summer. And it was too few people, it was only 2% of the number of the people in the study in both Pfizer and Moderna. So it was too few people to draw conclusions about whether it's effective. However, none of those 2% of people got COVID 19 who received the vaccine within the study. But again, it's just there were just too few to draw conclusions.
I think that's a really good point though, because too often the terms get misused, vaccine and treatment. And
Mm-hmm.
so, to be clear, vaccine is preventative. Treatment is you've already gotten the virus or whatever ailment it is and you're being treated for it. So, I just think it's important to continue to make that distinction.
Yes.
I always have to bring some hot topics into the conversation. So, the nurse that fainted after she got the shot,
Mm-hmm.
have you seen that clip?
I have.
Am I gonna faint when I get the shot?
I don't know. You might.
I knew Mel was
Um,
gonna say I don't know.
I
yeah,
think when
That's
they
why
draw
you
I
my
asked
might.
her.
blood,
But let's put it all in perspective.
Please, yes.
So there have been, probably that we know of between the Pfizer and the Moderna trials, 70,000 people. And then in the past week, they've vaccinated thousands more healthcare workers. And we've only heard of one person passing out.
Right.
So I would ask if you heard of, in your lifetime, the number of airplane accidents that you've heard of, but you still fly on an airplane. You're
Hmm.
willing to take that risk based upon the fact that you know that it's a minuscule number of airplane crashes given the total number of flights that take off every day. And so I would say, as you look at the side effects that happen, and they are going to be side effects, there are going to be people that pass out. There are going to be people that get Bell's palsy. There are going to be people that get transverse myelitis. I'm not going to sit up here and try to lie and say this is 100% safe. First of all, the safety that we know of has only been in the past 3 months. And those side effects that I just named have happened in less than 1% of all the people who have gotten the vaccine. The 99% of people who did not get those have had not had long term side effects, long term being 3 months to date. So, any of these things that you see, you have to put it into perspective. Realizing, yes, it could happen, but the chances that it might happen to you are very, very, very slim.
so we have a question coming from Carol Robinson. Carol asks, would the Johnson and Johnson vaccine work better for people with pre-existing condition because it's only one dose?
We don't know that yet, and I'm not going to be able to comment on anything that has not already gone through the FDA because the data is not fully available. But just because it's one dose, it doesn't necessarily correlate that it works better or not for a particular subgroup of people. It just means that they only need one dose and not two. So with Pfizer and Moderna, we've seen that there were about 25% of people, sorry, 22% of people in the study who had chronic disease. That means uh, COPD, heart disease, diabetes, obesity. And of the people who got the vaccine in the study, less than 95, less than 5% of them got COVID. So it was 95% efficacious for people with chronic disease. So we'll see when AstraZeneca and Johnson and Johnson and Sanofi, when they come up with, and Novavax, when they come out with their vaccines, what their data looks like, regardless of whether it's one dose or two doses. But that's a great question.
And the efficacy, Dr. Mel, for Black folks in these trials has been
100%. So, like I said, for Pfizer and Moderna, about 10% of the participants were Black people. Half of them got the vaccine, half of them got placebo, or like salt water injected.
Wow.
So for the people who got the vaccine, who were Black, in both studies, none of them got COVID. The people who got the placebo, some of them went on to get some of them went on to get COVID. And so based upon that data, it was shown that 100% efficacy in the subgroup of people who identify as African American,
Wow.
regardless
yeah,
of age.
Wow. Regardless of age.
yeah.
Yeah, regardless of age, pre-existing condition, 100% efficacy for Pfizer and Moderna for African Americans in the study.
Okay.
I just think we can't say that enough. But okay.
Well, it's important to know. It's
So,
important to know, just like it's important to know the side effects. Like I said,
Yes.
I'm here primarily to give the facts. I'm not going to tell people to take the vaccine or not take the
Right.
vaccine,
Right.
but I want you to have the information, and the information within the context of what Wayne said earlier, that 50,000 Black people have died since the beginning of this pandemic, and 1,000 more are dying each week. We know that COVID-19 gets into sperm. We don't know whether it causes infertility or not, but we know it gets into sperm. We know that it causes blood clots. We know that it causes strokes and heart attacks. We know that they're long haulers who will have symptoms for months and months and months. We've heard conspiracies that the vaccine causes infertility. There's actually no factual basis and no mechanism by which it could cause infertility. COVID is what you need to be concerned about, whether it causes infertility. We have not heard of any deaths related to the vaccine, but we've heard of 50,000 deaths for Black people specifically, and of course, 1.4 million deaths worldwide related to COVID-19.
okay.
So when you
So,
start to think about the balance sheet, again, you kind of have to make your decision based upon the balance sheet.
okay. So we have a couple people asking the same question, and we have a couple of those. So I want to move to actually before we get to the few people asking the same question, we have a question from uh, a, a listener and a watcher who's been on every week, and she is a supporter because I see who comes on and asks questions. I'm just letting y'all know. So I want to get to her question, and that's Ellen Claire Lamb. Are there differences between the vaccines meaningful, or do they basically work the same way?
Great question, Claire, and thanks for joining tonight. So, for Pfizer and Moderna, there aren't any really meaningful differences. I've kind of run down the differences, but in the final analysis, when you're talking about large groups of people taking it, no. The main difference is I think Moderna in the end will end up having a much wider distribution just because it's easier to transport and easier to give in a variety of different settings, whereas the Pfizer is going to have a much narrower group that it can be used with because it has to have all these rigid requirements around storage. But because they work by the same mechanism, the mRNA, they appear so far to have about the same efficacy and safety profiles given the 3 months of data that we have.
Okay, we have a question coming from Alexis Kellum, and she asked the same question that a few other people ask, and that is 3 months long enough time to allow for side effects to manifest in study participants? And I can speak in public. I'm sorry.
Hi, Alexis. Alexis is another person who's on just about every week, so and asks great questions like this one. And that's really the thing I think that causes most people pause. The people especially that are saying, yeah, you go ahead and take it. and I'm going to check you out for a few months and then see. So, most vaccine side effects happen in the first 2 to 3 months of administration. Those are the things that we've seen, like a severe allergic reaction, like Bell's palsy, or basically nerve complications. Bell's palsy is the seventh cranial nerve goes to sleep, and you get that droop in your face. Inflammation of the nerves of your spinal cord that can cause paralysis. Um, those did happen. Again, with Bell's palsy, I think it was like 4 people. With the transverse myelitis, I think it was 2. And again, that's out of 70,000 people between the two studies. So those kinds of side effects, again, happen most in the first 2 months after vaccine administration. And those tend to be the side effects that most people are concerned about. So that's why the follow-up period was chosen as such. They are going to continue to monitor people for 2 years to be 100% sure, and there'll be new information coming out. In those 2 years, though, that the question again is, the more people who get vaccinated, the sooner we can come to a new normal in terms of the quote unquote end of this pandemic. The longer that we wait, the longer that we're going to persist in this sort of purgatory that we're in right now. And so that's the risk benefit that we have to weigh and figure out. Some people have broached the issue of, well, could there be long-term side effects like autism or Alzheimer's because of the additives? And to that I say, additives have been in vaccines since 1920. As I mentioned before, actually even before that, they just got popular in 1920 going forward. Millions and millions of people have gotten vaccines with some of the same additives that are being used today. And it wasn't until the last 20, 30 years that we started to see Alzheimer's and autism. So I really don't think that that's the cause. I don't think that vaccines and their additives are the cause of what we're seeing in the last 20 to 30 years, because these same ingredients have been in use since 1920, and we haven't seen the explosion of autism and Alzheimer's that we have
So,
now.
so thank you, Dr. Clarke. I want to get to these questions because they're coming in fast and furious.
All right, I'll shorten my answers.
Okay, thank you. We're going to start the speed round 17 minutes out. Look, we have two of the same questions. First one coming from Kathy Sindos. And are you concerned about the variant showing up in the UK recently? And then Angelique Proctor follows that. Any concerns about the variant that is spreading now in the UK could come here? Would that be another vaccine?
Hi, fam. Yeah, so yes, I am concerned, as many people are concerned. I've even heard people calling for travel bans. However, realize that there was a mutation in the summer that caused more contagiousness in Texas. And before that, one that caused, back in the spring, that caused more contagiousness in Boston. So it doesn't mean that the disease that resulted is a more severe disease. It just means that it spreads more quickly. So we already have those faster spreading strains within our population. That being said, the same safety measures that we're being asked to do now are the same safety measures that will counteract any strain that pops up that's more contagious. We just have to do what we got to do, which is social distance, stay at home, wear our mask, wash our hands. And
Okay.
as far as a new vaccine, yes, this has not been said officially, but it is my opinion that as the COVID virus mutates, we're going to have vaccine updates at some period of time. Maybe not yearly like the flu vaccine, but we'll have to establish the cadence of it, and that is to be determined based upon this first round of vaccines that are happening.
Okay. Here's another question from Max Gregory Anderson. Once you receive the vaccine, what does that mean? Am I able to not wear a mask, socially distance, etc.? What is the unprecedented precedent emphasis for black and brown folk to take this vaccine. This focused targeting is one of the main reasons for suspicion. Please speak to that.
Well,
He's
thank you, Max
demanding you
Gregory.
speak to it.
Thank you, Max Gregory Anderson. Those are great questions, and I might ask for
We
it to
lost
be.
your sound.
Uh, okay, can you hear me?
I don't
I
have
can
sound for you.
I can hear you, Dr. Mill.
Okay, all right, great.
Can we hear Dr.
So,
Clarke?
yeah, Lila says she can hear me. Can everybody hear me?
Okay.
All right. Can you hear me, Wayne?
Yes, I can.
Great. So, Max Gregory Anderson, great question. The first part of it is if you take the vaccine, um, it is not clear that it keeps you from having the virus in your body and spreading it to other people. It is clear that it keeps you from getting sick from the virus. Thank you, Renee. So, therefore, we will still need to practice around people who haven't gotten the vaccine. We will still need to protect them by wearing a mask and staying distant from them. Thank you, everybody. So, and that's a really important question that needs to be answered, and more testing needs to be done because we want to get to a place where a vaccine prevents us from getting and spreading the virus. Okay, it's an important distinction. It's subtle but very important. Second thing about your question: why the emphasis on black and brown people? Well, let me tell you why. Because we are the most traumatized group in the country from our previous experience with medical racism, Tuskegee, forced sterilization, experimentation upon us, and we have the highest degree of vaccine hesitancy and skepticism for that reason. And then you couple that with Ahmaud Arbery, Christian Cooper, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, all happening this year, and heightening further our distrust of the messengers that brought us the information about the COVID-19 vaccine. The very system that's supposed to take care of us has constantly and still is reminding us that it does not have our best interest at heart. And so rolling out this vaccine in that environment, both historically and and current, has made it necessary to say to black people, look, we value you as much as everybody else. Your lives are as precious as everybody else. You are suffering from this virus more than everybody else because of all this historical racism and current racism. And so we're making a special invitation to you to try to address your concerns, number one, and number two, help you to be comfortable with whatever decision you decide to make if it is to take this vaccine. I have been a proponent of starting this work in June. I started this work with June with a group from Black Coalition Against COVID-19 and have been doing it tirelessly ever since. I didn't know whether the vaccine was going to be one worthy of rollout, but I knew that it was important that we participate in the trials because any result that came out of it had to be one that was inclusive of us. And now that it's here, along with many other scientists who participated in this process, who developed the vaccine, Dr. Kizzmekia Corbett, people who work at the FDA and who have advised the FDA, like the president of Meharry Medical School, even down to the black nurse who was the first person on U.S. soil to take the vaccine. It has been a concerted effort to include and highlight black people all along the way to try to allay some of the concerns, legitimate concerns, that we as black people have.
Okay, I have a question from the West Coast, which is more around behaviors than it is vaccine, which I think is really important for us to touch on given that we're in the holiday season, right? And people are still really, really determined to gather. It's interesting in the work that I do, I have several of my counterparts who have decided to travel across the country. Um, so I know what your response is going to be, Dr. Mel, but can we talk about the behaviors that keep us safe? And this is the specific question from the West Coast. These thermal thermometers, where people like you can't walk into certain places without getting your temp check.
Mm-hmm.
What is a temp check that if somebody comes to my door and I pull out my thermometer, what's the cutoff point for me to say you can't come in here mask or not?
Yeah, 100.5. Some people
Oh,
use
ooh,
100.5. Some people use
let me
99.5.
tell you, if you have 100.5, how are you walking up to the door? But
Well,
okay.
100.5,
Why are you
Why
out
are
of
you
bed?
out of bed?
you might have a headache, but a lot of people walk around with
Woo.
100.5 who have a cold or, the flu and still power through it, right? Some people use 99.5 as a cutoff, but either
Okay.
way, only 30% of people who show up at the hospital have a
Have
temperature
fever.
with
Hmm.
COVID. So that's not even the walking well who don't go to the hospital. It's going to be much less than that. And then the 40% of people who get it who never get symptoms at all.
Oh,
Which
And
is
Dr.
so,
Clark, let me interrupt you.
yeah.
State those numbers again. How
Mm-hmm.
many people show up with the temperature at the hospital?
30%, one in three. So 70% don't have a temperature when they show up at the hospital.
which
And
was kind
then,
of a backhanded question from me because it's a false safety that we're
yeah,
experiencing in these
yeah,
places that are pulling out the thermometer. So
it's theater. It's health theater.
yeah.
It's just to make
Oh,
people feel better, but it doesn't really mean anything. The
okay.
self-reported symptoms as well. And the other thing is, if you take Tylenol or Motrin, even if you
Yeah.
had a fever, by the time you go to get it taken, it might be gone. So, all that to say, the best thing to do is wear your mask, wash your hands, don't go unless it's mandatory, and use Zoom as much as possible. I mean, those are really the things that we should be doing, and washing our hands and not touching our faces. Those are the things that we should be doing. Those are the behaviors, the temperature checks. I just spoke with a friend of mine yesterday who goes into work at a federal building where they're doing temperature checks, and they've had two COVID outbreaks there in her
Right.
Uh,
workplace over
Right.
since the summer.
so, Lila,
Yes.
now that the am I correct that the governor is now in quarantine of California, of the state?
Yeah, Governor Newsom.
Yes.
So has in California, because I just had this, and hopefully he's watching. He's a great friend of mine, who is a incredible producer, musician from the West Coast, and I don't want to call anybody out, and who's planning to travel, get on a plane and travel from Los Angeles to Jersey. And I have another family member who called me, and I'm not going to say names, who called me about her mom wanting to visit uh, her, their grandmother and everybody going for Christmas.
Hmm.
In 2 minutes, Dr. Mel, in 2 minutes, what should they do?
Stay home.
That was 2 seconds.
I can tell you the reasons why.
Tell me the
Everybody
reasons why.
everybody thinks this is not going to happen to them. But I submit to you, 18 million people thought it wasn't going to happen to them, and 350,000 people are dead who thought it was not going to happen to them. And, if you do end up in the hospital or your loved one ends up in the hospital, you can't see them. You can't be there to advocate for them. I had a doctor, a physician, non black physician, say to me, one of the reasons black people are dying at a disproportionate rate is because nobody is there. There's no family member to make
Mm.
sure that they are the squeaky wheel and that
Mm.
they are being taken care of. And so, as you're seeing in California, care getting rationed, it happened in New York. The people who are going to be at the bottom of that rationing list are the people whose lives matter least.
Hmm.
So if you're a black person and you love another black person, don't give them COVID, because if they end up in the hospital, they're not going to have anybody to advocate for them. And if it's a situation with rationing and there's nobody to advocate for them, they may end up at the bottom of the list. The other reason to not go is because there's Zoom. The other reason to not go is because there's a vaccine, and this time next year, we're only asking you to forfeit one set of holidays this 2020 holiday season. Next year, this time, I foresee that it'll be a much better situation. Just give it up this 1 year so that you can spend next year with your loved one and you don't have to look around in January and February and feel guilty and kick yourself that you gave your loved one COVID because you were too selfish and too immature to skip this one holiday.
Listen, my mother said if you are thinking about coming to Texas, do not. Thank you. God bless you. Love you. See you when I see
I'll write you a
Wow.
letter, email
you.
you, and Zoom you. I love your
Wow.
mother. Tell her I said hi.
That's important. So we have a holiday question that was early in the show, and I held it because I knew we were going to be talking about the holidays. And I'm getting back to the question, and it's about
About
baking.
treats. Yes.
It's about
It's
what?
about, it's
Cookies,
about is it
treats.
huh?
Oh,
It's about eating.
about
Yeah.
treats.
And as you can tell, I love to eat. It's no secret. Is it safe to accept homemade baked goods from kind neighbors for the holidays?
Absolutely. Have them leave them at your doorstep. Don't have them come in the house. When you pick it up from outside, wipe it down. If it's a baked good, you're good to go because the virus doesn't survive on after cooking. If you want to be sure, heat it up yourself. Um, and just as you've been getting DoorDash and Uber Eats, or picking it up from the restaurant yourself, and you're still fine, I think your neighbor's food will be fine. Now, if they let the cat curl up in the frying pan, that's something different. But otherwise, if you're worried about COVID, it should be okay.
Wow. Wow. So we have one question that comes from Swayzine Bryant. And I'm gonna have I'm gonna have can we go over in time today? And I'm loving this information. And
so, so the
I'm
West
going
Coast producer is jumping in and saying we got to get Dr. Mel her rest.
we have to give Dr. Mill her rest because she is coming out of a uh, a hospital stay.
Well, I'll speak to that myself. I haven't been with you consistently since October, and it's because I've had my own my own health challenges. And I can directly say, I always talk about the five self health actions: nutrition, sleep, water, exercise, and stress management. I do the first four great, but the stress management with COVID, I hadn't really been doing a great job. I was accepting every speaking engagement. I was still working my 9 to 5. I was being with you every Monday night. And when the warning signs creeped up, I just ignored them and pushed them down to the side. And then I got a neck check in the form of severe stomach pain. And had I not gone to the hospital, I probably would have been dead by now because when I got there, my blood pressure went to zero almost, and I had to be resuscitated. And thankfully, my husband recognized and basically picked me up and threw me over his shoulder and forced me in the car and took me to the hospital. But the bottom line is, I had a hole in my colon. Was in the hospital for 11 days. They let me go with IV antibiotics. I was giving myself IV antibiotics 3 times a day. And after 5 weeks, it still didn't heal. So they did surgery. I had surgery at the beginning of this month. Luckily, they went ahead and did it because it showed that the only thing that was keeping things together was, I won't get all technical, but bottom line, my body had formed this little temporary situation and it wasn't going to hold for much longer. So thank God I had the surgery. It went well. I've been home for 3 weeks now and I'm doing much better. And I was actually going to take off until the new year, but I was getting so many questions about the vaccine. I said, I got to come on. I got to talk to my peeps. I got to tell you happy solstice, happy holidays, and let you know that when the universe says sit your ass down, excuse my language, you
We'll
have
beat
to
that
do
out.
it. Yeah, you have to do it. And I've learned now how to do it, how better to say no, how better to self care and take time for myself. And I'm going to continue to do that after I get off with you tonight into the new year. when I'm going to go back to work and pick up my schedule, but I'll be carrying these lessons forward. So I went into all that detail just to share it with you. Today is the solstice. Solstice means stillness. And really, that's what these holidays are about. We've corrupted it with a lot of, activities, cooking and shopping and all that kind of stuff. But take time for yourself to recharge over these holidays before we step into the new year. Learn the lessons of 2020. Everybody has had a lesson this year. Learn it, master it, and take it forward with you. And I am wishing everybody a peaceful Christmas, Kwanzaa, Hanukkah, which is already passed, and New Year. And I want to thank my producers who've been fantastic this year. I want to thank my audience. Y'all have helped me step my game up with your questions. And thank you for tuning in every week and supporting me on YouTube and Facebook. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to seeing you more in the new year. But you won't see me before January. Okay? All right.
So
So with
so
that,
we're already over. We're
we're
already
already
over.
over.
So this
Yes.
is producer's privilege right here.
Okay.
Uh because I want everybody to know there is a connection, and I'm going to answer the question. There is a connection with COVID and vitamin D deficiency. So that's a big question. Take
Yes.
Most people who end up in the hospital are low in vitamin D.
Well, not only that, more people who are vitamin D deficient test positive for COVID. More of them end up in the hospital. More of them end up in the ICU, and more of them die. Studies where they've started to administer vitamin D in the hospital, mainly in countries outside the United States like Spain and the Netherlands, those studies have shown that those individuals do better and they don't end up in the ICU when vitamin D gets administered when they get admitted.
Okay, that's enough.
So take your vitamin D, check with your doctor. The magic number is at least a level of 30 to 40 in your blood. And so you want to focus on that vitamin D and get your doctor to do a level.
Okay, producer's privilege here. I want to thank everybody for coming on. This started out of the need for Melissa to get the truth out about she every day she was screaming at the TV when these COVID meetings were coming on. And the only way I knew how to get it out and out of my living room and out of my head was to tell her to do something about it. And she wrote an article. It was shared a great many times in 2 days. And she went to uh, the first thing we had was an iPad just on Facebook. And now it's grown. In the new year, you'll hear her on radio. You will see her on TV. She actually had to turn down some TV roles, some TV appearances while she was sick. And you'll hear more from Dr. Melissa Clarke, and excuse me, doctor. And I want to thank Lila Mays on the West Coast, who has gone above and beyond the call of duty. This is a calling for her, and we thank her and love her. We want to thank Rhoda Lawrence, who is also on the West Coast, for doing all they. We want to thank our families for hanging in and urging us to continue and tuning in every week, and you guys for tuning in every week. And I promise you, it is my promise that in the new year, excuse me, doctor, this streaming show will be even better. And we want to thank all the guests that have been on. We've had guests on from every field of human endeavor, from every walk of life. And even people who have been uh, stricken with COVID. And we want to
Yes.
thank the COVID survivors. That's one of our shows. You go watch that show, uh, and it is powerful. So stay at home, stay safe. We love you. Dr. Clarke, the last your last statement, or Lila, you got anything?
No, not Dr. Clark said it all. We'll see you all in the new year.
All
Dr.
right.
Clarke, sign us out.
Well, until I see you in January, I love you and be safe, be well, and be health empowered.